Welcome to the Black Belt Husband Podcast. I'm your host, Quentin Hafner, licensed therapist, thought leading expert for men, and the creator of the Black Belt Husband System. This podcast exists for one reason: to train men to win in the one relationship that matters most, their marriage. If your relationship feels distant, if you're walking on eggshells, if nothing you've tried is working, you're not a failure, you just don't have the right blueprint. Inside this podcast, you'll learn the mindsets, tools, and frameworks to lead your home with strength, create peace in your marriage, and win back your wife's admiration and desire. Black Belt Husband is the step-by-step path to reclaim your power and transform your relationship. Let's get started. Okay, everybody, welcome to the Black Belt Husband Podcast. And gosh, we have a great conversation ahead for today. We are going to talk about something that doesn't get talked about enough when it comes to men and relationships and what it means to be a black belt husband. We're going to be talking about being intolerant of bad behavior. So welcome to the show. Hey, Lucas.
Hey guys, how's it going?
All right. Okay, so let's kind of like give this show a little bit of a backdrop, and let's start by talking about like where does this idea come from, being intolerant of bad behavior. So, and for those of you that have not been through the Black Belt Husband system, there's 5 pillars in the system, and this is actually pillar number 3 of the Black Belt Husband system. So, what we're basically saying in this pillar is that all of us, because we're humans and we're flawed, we are going to show up to relationships with bad behavior sometimes. And even though we might have really awesome wives and we might think our wives are really great, they're not angels, they're not perfect. And sometimes they're going to show up to relationships and they're going to do things that don't work for us. They're going to do things that we don't like. And so we have to have a process and a mechanism and a skill set of knowing like what do we do when that happens, because if we don't have that skill set, a lot of guys, um, well, they do one of two things. They either do nothing and they get super resentful and passive aggressive, or they blow up, in fits of rage. And so both of those strategies are losing strategies. So we want to know how to set the standard in a relationship, how to have healthy boundaries. What do we do when our partners don't show up well? Because that's going to happen. And also realizing too that if we don't have a mechanism, if we don't have a process for how to be intolerant of bad behavior, then we will let the relationship kill us slowly over time. We will die a slow death in a relationship. And so we want to fix all that. And it's such an important topic. This is the thing I really want you guys to hear, is that it's such a critical topic for the success of a relationship that it has its own pillar. It is one of only 5 pillars to be a masterful husband. That's how important it is. Anything you want to add to that, Lucas?
Yeah, just that I think this is might be a little bit of a, taboo topic or, we're talking about being intolerant. Like we're not saying be harsh and be mean and be rude, but if there's no standard in the relationship, you're going to suffer and the relationship will suffer. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
that's really our heart, I think, behind this episode, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And also just recognizing too that, so many, I guess we're going to kind of like jump in a little bit too, to like, kind of why this happens. But before we get into all those details, I think I just want to say that like a lot of guys have been conditioned. I just want to use that word. I think they've been
Hmm.
conditioned in culture, in society, even from their family of origin, that what it means to be a good husband is to be completely tolerant of everything that your wife does. And we see this kind of like archetype of a husband in a lot of places in pop culture and in media, where the husband is um, kind of like a yes man, and he's living by this kind of like idea of like happy wife, happy life. And the wife in the scenario can be, massively disrespectful, super violating of boundaries, and the husband is kind of like, yes dear, whatever you say dear. And
Mm-hmm.
so that kind of archetype of a husband has been conditioned for a lot of guys. Like we've been conditioned that's what the role model is. That's what it means to be a good husband. Now, if that worked and we saw that people were successful in living relationships that way, I would be the biggest promoter of it. But we know it doesn't work. And the reason it doesn't work is because if you are in that state of mind of just being kind of a yes dear guy over time, there is no way around it. You are going to get resentful. And then that
Yeah.
resentment that builds, it's going to start bleeding its way into the relationship. It's going to start killing the relationship. It's going to start showing up as like this like ugly kind of passive aggressive behavior. But it kind of go tracing it back to the roots. No one ever taught you that it was okay to be intolerant of bad behavior, and then kind of like what to do if bad behavior shows up in the relationship.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So diving into pillar number three here of the black belt husband system, why is this such a critical pillar for husbands to master if they want to win at the game of marriage?
Yeah, so if we want to win in the game of marriage, okay, so just to keep it really simple, something that I say a lot, it's a little bit of like a Quentin-ism about relationships, is that relationships, if we break them down kind of very simply, they are just they are a byproduct of only two things. They are a byproduct of what we create and what we tolerate. So I think about it like opposite sides of the same coin. So on one hand, the creation side, what we create, that's kind of like getting into like how do we show up? A lot of the leadership stuff that we talk about here on the podcast. Am I generous? Am I loving? Am I kind? Am I a good listener? Am I empathetic? Am I all those wonderful qualities? And that's all the stuff that's kind of written in like marriage books. But there's an opposite and equally as important side of that same coin, and it's what do we tolerate? So it's what do I create and what do I tolerate? So the toleration side is the mechanism and it's the stuff that we do. Like, well, what do we do? Like, what do we do when our partners don't show up in the best version of themselves? What do
Mm-hmm.
I do when somebody is disrespectful to me, somebody's rude to me, somebody's demeaning to me, somebody's whatever, something that it just doesn't work for me. I don't like it. It doesn't make me feel good. It's not working. So what do I do when that happens? And this is the stuff that it's not like it's never in marriage helping resources, but most marriage helping resources, it's all about the creation side. It doesn't talk about this other half of the coin, which is really important. And if you think about this, you see that in order for any relationship to be successful, and this could be a business relationship, a marriage, a parenting relationship, a friendship, in order for relationships to be successful, there has to be a feedback mechanism where if the relationship gets off kilter, we have to have a process of saying, hey, I didn't like that. That didn't work for me. And ideally the other person would say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I can understand why it felt that way. And it's like, boom, we're back into harmony. We're back into the flow of the relationship. There's that reciprocity, there's that feedback loop, so we can address things that don't work. Well, a lot of guys, they've taken this mechanism that we inherently understand and see, so that applies to all other relationships, but when it comes to their marriage, they've kind of thrown it out the window. They're like, I don't need that
Yep.
feedback mechanism. you know that's not what the pastor of the church told me what it means to be a good husband, that I should just be this way. And it's like, yeah, you should be that way, but that's only half of it. There's another of it, because to be intolerant of my bad behavior too, because I am also a flawed human. And when I show up in relationship with her and my behavior is poor, she needs to have a feedback mechanism where she can say, hey, that doesn't work for me. So we have to do this. But what I've noticed, and this is why we talk about it inside Black Belt Husband, is that guys are, yeah, I'll just use the word most guys are really bad at this.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know what to do. They don't know how to do it. They don't know if it's okay to do it. There's a lot of guilt associated with it. I think that's where the cultural conditioning piece comes in. but they're just like a deer in the headlights. We talk, and you can relate to this too when you talk to your clients about like, hey, like, well, your wife did that thing. I know you didn't like that. So what did you do in response? And it's like, I don't know. It's like just deer. I don't even know what to do. Is it
I
okay
left the
to say
room.
something? All right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, exactly. I was just saying, it's like, you ask them, well, what'd you do? And they're like, I left the room. I got out of the conversation. I
I
avoided
bailed.
it. I bailed. Or I got
Right.
really angry.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, yeah, I think exactly. I think a lot of it, I think deep down men do and husbands want to know how to do this because I think that's like, it's really innate for us to stand up and protect other people and protect ourselves. But there's this like cultural conditioning, like you were saying around it, where I think a lot of times guys, they just like don't know what to say. They don't know what to do. And so I love getting to like be in those conversations and challenge them, but also give language and like let them, I think the big thing is like you don't deserve to be treated like that. So
Yeah.
why are you tolerating it?
Right.
Right?
Right. Yeah. And this is not like, I just want to clarify too, this is not an indictment against wives. It's like nobody deserves to be treated poorly, right? We should all set a standard that we deserve to be treated well inside relationships, especially inside our most significant relationships, the relationships that matter most to us. And so this works, this works both ways, and it's important to address both sides of this. So why don't we get into looking at some of the root cause? Okay, so
Oh,
we're kind of asking the question, why do guys have a hard time being intolerant of bad behavior? Okay, so why is this such an important idea that we have to talk about it as one of our main pillars inside Black Belt Husband? Okay, so Uh, number one, most guys were never taught how to have boundaries or how to hold boundaries. Okay, so what is a boundary? So let's just kind of go through some of the basics. What is the boundary? So um, when we think about boundaries, the best way to think about it is think about your house, and in the backyard there's probably a fence that you have in the backyard. Okay? So the fence is a physical boundary that basically says, "Hey, on this side of the fence, this is mine, and on that side of the fence, this is yours." The boundary creates tons of clarity for people, okay, which is beautiful. This is why boundaries are so important. It creates a lot of clarity on, what side is yours and what side is mine. Now, when it comes to relationships, we also need to have boundaries in relationships, but obviously not from a physical fence standpoint, but more from like an emotional. So the boundaries inside a relationship say, hey, um, well, let's go back to the physical fence thing for a second. So the concept of a boundary is that the fence in the backyard protects the contents inside the backyard. Okay, so the point of the fence is not so much to keep people away. The point of the fence is to protect what is in the backyard. And the same principle is applied in our relationships when it comes to boundaries. So we set boundaries to protect the contents that's inside of us. So we can think about that like we're protecting our own like emotional equilibrium, if you will. We're protecting our own kind of well-being. Okay. A lot of guys were never taught that it's okay to do that. A lot of guys have been conditioned and taught that that's selfish, or that they should feel guilty for feeling that way, that that just that language of like you're not really being a good husband if you have boundaries. And I'm going to tell you the opposite is true. You cannot be, and like you got to just hear the strength in my language. You cannot be a good husband if you don't have boundaries. Okay, so that's the that's a big one. So another one, which is related to the boundaries, is that a lot of guys believe that what it means to be a good, loving husband is to be passive. So the more passive I am, the more accommodating I am, the more deferential I am, the more of like, oh, whatever you want, dear, the more I'm in that energy. That's what it means to be a good husband. Okay, so you could see if I'm in that energy, I would never be intolerant of bad behavior. My wife could, look down at me. She could demean me or condemn me or whatever, just do something really, really mean spirited, but if my belief system is that what it means to be loving is to just be more passive, I'm never going to challenge that. I'm going to say, oh yeah, you're right, like I am a loser. Okay, yeah, I'll work on not being a loser, right? Or something like that. Okay. And then the third thing is that there's a lot of conflict avoidance that happens with guys. Okay. So guys will never be intolerant of bad behavior if we're afraid of conflict, because if I need to be intolerant of something that my wife did, well, guess what? We might get into an argument about that. We might get into conflict about that. And if I'm afraid of that and I don't want to deal with that, then of course I'm never going to um, address that stuff. And then what happens is over time, if we have this pattern that exists, for 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years into a relationship, what we are doing is that we are through our actions, we are communicating and teaching. We're teaching. We is that cliche is that we train people how to treat us. So we are training our wives that we are not intolerant of bad behavior and that they can walk on us. And we're basically saying, I'm too afraid to lead and to stand up for myself. So I'm giving you permission to walk all over me or walk over me. And then that pattern exists over time. And then what happens is wives lose a ton of respect for their husbands. And this is the guys that this is the part that guys can't see, is that in your attempt to be more accommodating and the more tolerant you are of bad behavior, I always say it to my clients, is that you might win the short term battle, but you're definitely going to lose the long term war, because over time your wife will not respect you. There's a thing inside all of us as human beings, is that we know when we cross the line. And when we cross the line, we want people to say, hey, you crossed the line. Now, in the moment, it probably doesn't feel good. We don't like it, but we respect that other person for having enough self-respect and dignity for being able to stand up for themselves. And when we don't do that, we just naturally don't hold people in high regard. And if to be black belt husband, you got to be held in high regard by your wife.
Mhm.
I know that was a whole mouthful, but does anything kind of like capture your attention?
This and thinking about it, maybe feeling a little affected or called out, just hit rewind and go back and like you touched on, we don't recognize that there are flaws to human nature. And the one place they're going to show up, especially if you've been married for a little bit, is your marriage. So you're going to
Mm,
need tools. And, I want to encourage guys, to really look at, we're going to give them some tools here in a second, right? Some
mm-hmm,
tools and some
mm-hmm.
processes. So if you're resonating with this and this is connecting, like not all is lost. You can turn this around. Um, so what are a few ways, if this is, some guys are going, yeah, this is me, man. How can they, how can they start turning around the dynamic in their relationship without being a tyrant?
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, I love that caveat, without being a tyrant, because it is easy to hear this conversation and it's going to kind of activate something emotionally. We're going to say, yeah, 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 she's being a bitch, and I'm gonna say something. It's like, no, dude, chill out, calm down. That's not where we're going.
Not allowed.
Okay, yeah, because you know it's just going to be self-defeating if you do
Mhm,
that. Okay.
mhm.
And so it's not what you want, because you want to have a great relationship. Okay. And so the starting place for this, and this is something we help guys with in our system, is like, okay, so first of all, if we are talking about being intolerant of bad behavior, it's like, what is the bad behavior? And this is where we have to be very clear within ourselves of like, what are the standards? I think another way to talk about it is what are the standards that you are going to uphold in your relationship? Okay. Another way to think about it is like and just to keep it simple, you could ask yourself, what are the five like non-negotiables for me? what are the 5 things that I'm just going to say, hey, no, you can't do that. That doesn't work for me anymore. This is the hill that I'm going to die. A lot of guys have really no idea what that is. They don't have clarity around that. They've never really taken the time to sit down and write that out. What are these 5 things? Like literally write them out. What are those things?
Mhm.
Okay. Is it the eye rolling? Is it the stonewalling? Is it the name calling? Is it the withholding affection? Is it control behavior? Start a list you can develop around what this really is for you. Okay. Because my version of bad behavior is and going to be the bad behavior listening podcast. So tell you what it needs to be for you. You need to understand what it is for you because all of us are a little bit different. But the premise is that we can't be intolerant of bad behavior if we're not like super clear about what exactly it is. Okay.
Mhm.
So then we can say, okay, well, I want to be able to communicate this to my wife. Okay. So just as a reminder, like we were saying before, this isn't like we're not going to get angry. We're not getting aggressive. We're not threatening. We're not yelling. We're not lecturing. We're just saying, hey, these things don't work for me anymore. And I cannot tolerate this anymore. Okay. And when we lean into a conversation that way, it's going to ruffle feathers. It's going to create conflict. And we have to I'm planting this seed with you ahead of time because if you have conflict aversion kind of in your blood, you're not going to want to do this. But I just want to say this is going to happen, but it's okay that it happens. Okay. This is like very normal. And just like you in any other relationship in your life, if it's not working for you, you're going to address it, right? And so the same principle has to apply with our personal relationships and of course with our wives. Okay. So just planting the seed, getting ready for conflict. And then through that process of conflict, it's going to get bumpy, but this is something we keep hearing from our clients all the time. Okay. And you're probably going to hear this and you're going to probably say that's too good to be true. That's not going to happen. I can't, if I had a nickel for every time a wife told me that she was so happy that her husband stood up to her, I would be a very rich man. It's like women want their husbands to say no or to say, "Hey, that doesn't work." They are actually craving it. It's like it's taking back your natural leadership ability to say, "Hey, this doesn't work for me anymore." And when you don't do that, there's a very important subconscious process that goes on in the relationship that she won't respect you and she's looking down at you and she's not holding you in that high regard and that high esteem that high regard and high esteem that you want her to. But when you start acknowledging that you're going to be intolerant of bad behavior, that you're going to set the boundaries, that you're going to say, hey, this doesn't work, then it's almost like when we said this before in other podcasts, she won't like it, but she will respect the hell out of it. And it's respect that's going to win your relationship. Okay. It's not like because you've already tried the like strategy. You've already tried the people pleasing, the nice guy, the being deferential, the being, the yes dear guy. And that doesn't work. It's not like she wants to have sex with you a bunch because you're the yes dear guy. We just know that that ain't going to work, right? In fact, the opposite is true. She's turned off by you because you're the yes dear guy. So we have to try something different. And the last thing that I want to say is and this is probably as important as everything we've said so far. If you are going to be intolerant of bad behavior within your spouse, you have to make sure that you are also intolerant of your own bad behavior. Okay, so this is not taking out the magnifying glass and shining it on your wife. I mean, yeah, you have to be honest about what doesn't work for you for sure, but I also want you to turn it I want you to hold up the mirror and say, how am I showing up in the relationship that I should be intolerant of within myself?
Mhm. And that really hits on pillar number one of the black belt husband system, be the leader. And
Exactly.
all goes back to that concept of being able to lead yourself. So, little mirror check, right? Look in the mirror and see if you have some bad behavior, might want to apply this to yourself because it's going to, back to your respect point, it's going to give you a lot more respect and credibility when you address your wife's bad behavior.
And you could even invite your wife into that conversation if you feel brave enough. You can say, "Hey, I'm getting clear on the things that don't work for me, and I'm going to start articulating those to you. But I also want you to do the same for I want to know what yours are to me. Tell me, okay? So let's not get into these like petty squabbles about something that feels like silly. Tell me like how is it that I show up that doesn't work for you? Because I want us to have like a lot of clarity around that. Let's just be honest with each other about that. I want you to hold me accountable to that, and I'm going to hold you accountable to that. That's another concept of being successful in a relationship. We have to hold each other accountable. So when I say, hey, I might ask a client, I say, do you hold your wife accountable to having good behavior? It's like, oh my gosh, no. Like, would you ever do that? That sounds really aggressive. That sounds very kind of like, is that the patriarchy? Kind of like, no, no. We have to hold each other accountable. Who's going to hold who? It's like when people mess up in relationships, we have to hold each other accountable. I'm so glad my wife holds me accountable. She holds me accountable to show up as the best version of myself. And because she has standards about how she expects to be interacted with and treated, she's going to hold me accountable. And when I don't do it that way, she's going to let me know. And vice versa. We hold each other accountable. This is like another one of those concepts that I feel like a lot of guys are afraid of that word. It's like, well, I'm going to hold my, it sounds like, oh, is that's like an employee kind of like, is that a boss employee relationship? Like when it's like, no, it just means in order for any relationship to function, we have to hold each other accountable. I let my kids hold me accountable. I say, hey guys, if I'm being a bad dad, if I cross the line, if I'm, mean to you, or if I snap at you, if I yell at you, tell me. I want to know. I'm giving you permission to hold me accountable to being a good dad. I do it with my wife. I do it with every important person in my life. And so to think that in marriage, like that principle just like evaporates, like it doesn't exist, that doesn't make sense.
Mhm.
And that's why a lot of people in relationships are struggling because they've kind of eliminated this very important mechanism.
So one last quick question here before we wrap up. If a guy wants to, or husband, this is hitting home, they want to implement it, how long have you typically seen it take to start changing this relational pattern? I mean, obviously it's not a go have a conversation and, but how long and what's the key to keeping them consistent with it?
Yeah. So I always like telling people if this is something that you haven't done in your relationship for some time and you're going to start implementing it because like I have to do this to be successful, I always say start very small. Okay. Start super, super small. And what I want people to do is I just want them to get clear on what is one thing that they need to be intolerant of. Don't throw the laundry list, of problems at your partner, at your wife. Say, oh, you need to change these 10 things. That kind of like kitchen sink strategy will just make the relationship completely implode. Okay. And so find out what is just one thing and pick an easy one. Pick really low hanging fruit. Like, hey, I'm not going to let you curse at me anymore. Okay.
Mhm.
And by the way, listening to this, we shouldn't curse at our partners. Okay. We shouldn't do that. If that's happening in your relationship, you can borrow that one from me. That should be a standard that nobody should have in their relationship. So if that, like, let's just say, for example, that exists in your relationship. Okay. So what you want to do is you want to know in my mind, okay, I'm going to be intolerant of that. And you also want to know, like, this is probably going to happen at some point if it's a pattern. And when it happens, boom, just be ready to set the boundary. Just be ready to say, hey, you know what? I've decided that that doesn't work for me anymore in the relationship. I'm not going to let you curse anymore with me inside of our relationship. And just start there. Pick very low hanging fruit. Okay. And this is what will happen. If you start with super low hanging fruit and you just start setting the boundary, then it starts to shift the entire relationship. And a lot of the other bad behavior that you might feel like, well, I need to address that one, and I need to address that one, and I need to address that one. What really happens in real life is that when you address like one of a small thing, it starts to impact the likelihood of those other big things showing up in the relationship. It's a weird thing, like Imagine this scenario. If you have a professional relationship, so like, let's say you're the owner of a company, and you have an employee, and the employee does like 10 things wrong. Okay. But you never really say anything about it. Well, if you just address one main thing that they're doing wrong, what usually happens is the other nine things that they've also been doing wrong, they start to automatically shift organically, because it's kind of like you put people on notice a little bit and saying, hey, I'm upholding standards and this is the new standard. And then people start to kind of like intuit that this is going to happen. And so we don't need to like throw the whole kitchen sink at it. We just need to start with one small thing and just go from there.
That is such a great takeaway. Start with one thing, figure out what's not working for you, and let's get to work.
All right. Okay, guys. Thanks for listening. Hopefully this is helpful, and we'll chat soon. Thanks for tuning in to the Black Belt Husband podcast. If today's episode gave you a new insight or a challenge to raise your standard, do me a favor, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with another man who's ready to lead stronger at home. Your marriage doesn't change by accident. It changes because you show up leading different. Keep going, and I'll see you inside the next episode.